Eric, I know you've spent a lot of time in the region, in Egypt recently. How does that play on the Egyptian street, that the Muslim Brotherhood comes out and tries to suggest that this militant attack on Egyptian soldiers that was hell-bent on its way to trying to kill Israeli civilians and soldiers would somehow be a Mossad conspiracy? I mean, over in this country, I just think that our audience would hear about this and they're like, well, of course, this is so ridiculous. Does that get any traction, that sort of conspiracy theory, that sort of nonsense, on the Egyptian street?
Unfortunately, it gets a lot of traction. I mean, the people in Egypt look at the Mossad as an omnipotent organization that could basically pull off anything. It can co-opt Islamic militants to wage an attack against Israel that Israel then quashes for Israeli benefits. This is, like you said, a grand scheme that would never really fly with the mainstream American public, but really does fly in Egypt. And that just kind of underscores the public diplomacy challenge that we face there. Look, I mean, I spoke with a lot of Muslim brothers on this last trip about this exact scenario. What happens if the attacks that we've seen for months in the Sinai can escalate and create a crisis between Israel and Egypt? And what they kept saying to me was, what attacks? Those aren't really happening. The reports that you're citing are just things that Israel is making up to make us, the Muslim Brotherhood, look bad. So maybe this latest attack will force them to deal with things more realistically. But given the Muslim Brotherhood's response right now, blaming the Mossad, I'm not very optimistic.
Eric, what is, this is Ben Domenech, what is Morsi's game in this situation? How is he going to try to play this scenario to further his own interests, and what are those interests in response to this?
It's a great question. I mean, I think what we have to remember here is that Mohamed Morsi is not an all-powerful president. He's currently in a power struggle with the military, and right now what he's going to want to do is suggest that he's in control of the situation, even though the military really holds the cards on security, which is why, for example, he accompanied General Tantawi to El Arish today to give a brief statement. He's going to make it look like he's the one controlling the policy looking forward, and he's the one that's being tough, even though a lot of what happens in the Sinai will be up to the military. I would say that that's really why we should be concerned about what the Muslim Brotherhood says about this situation, because what they say could very much undermine the Egyptian military's ability to deal with the instability in the Sinai, and in particular work with Israel on coming up with a security strategy for Sinai's instability.
Hi, Eric. This is Tara Setmayer, and that is actually a good segue into what I wanted to ask. How much of a disconnect is there between what the military is trying to achieve and what Morsi is dealing with, since he is playing both sides of the fence? I mean, the Egyptian people did vote in a Muslim Brotherhood head of state there. And, I mean, we all know that they have hatred for the Jews to the point where a Muslim Brotherhood official in his cabinet wouldn't do an interview with a Jewish journalist on French TV last month and wouldn't admit to the reason why. He just said, I don't want to do it. I mean, the hatred there is clear. So this is going to be quite the power struggle. So how much of a disconnect do you think is there, and how in jeopardy do you think the 79 peace accord is in?
Look, I mean, yeah, I think those are great questions. I think that what has happened so far is not what Morsi would have wanted to happen. Specifically, Egypt announced that it's going to shut down a lot of the tunnels that go from Sinai into Gaza, that it's going to close the Rafah crossing into Gaza, at least for the time being. I mean, those are things that Mohamed Morsi really didn't want to see happen, but frankly, he has no ability to stop it because the military really holds the cards here right now. And I think that we're just going to have to wait and see, does he kind of stick with the Muslim Brotherhood and support the line that this is really a Mossad operation? Does he kind of just, make broad statements but not take any firm stance because there's frankly nothing for him to do? We need to watch it. As for the 79 peace treaty, already a lot of the chatter on Facebook among Egyptians has said that the reason for Sinai's instability is the limits that that treaty places on the Egyptian military in the Sinai. This is actually false, and I think it needs to be very clear that under the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, Egypt can negotiate more troop deployments in the Sinai. And in fact, right now, Egypt's allowed to put 7 battalions in the Sinai, which it's done, but those battalions battalions are very limited, they're understaffed, they're undersupported, and they're not even doing patrols. They're really just guarding major roads. So what we need to say, what the United States needs to say is, look, you know, the problem is not the treaty. The problem is that the military is not doing its job. But to your point, no question that there are going to be many people in Egypt who try to use these attacks as an excuse to change or perhaps destroy the peace treaty with Israel.